All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating and wildly contrasting realities of the 1934 World Cup. Because, this wasn't just some early sporting event. It was a high-stakes geopolitical thriller that crashed head-on with the raw, totally unpolished era of early international football. We're going to see exactly how the world's biggest games and global politics really started to intertwine.
Win or die. Vincere o morire. Now that is a chilling directive. It was reportedly handed down by Italian dictator Benito Mussolini directly to his national team, and it absolutely sets the ultimate stakes for our story today. But to really grasp how we ended up in this intense pressure cooker, we first have to look at the incredibly quirky and honestly chaotic infancy of international football.
Section 1. The Road to Rome, the Wild West of 1934 football. So, the 1934 tournament was a logistical Wild West. Believe it or not, even the host nation, Italy, actually had to qualify to play in their own tournament. And to add to the chaos, the reigning champions, Uruguay, boycotted the entire event in protest, just because European teams hadn't bothered to travel to their tournament 4 years earlier.
Just think about the number 15 for a second. That is the exact number of days the Mexican national team spent just traveling to the tournament.
International travel in the 1930s was a total endurance test. Day 1 kicks off with a massive casino party in Orizaba. By day 10, they're on a steamship crossing the Atlantic. They finally catch a train from Paris on day 13 and roll into Rome on day 15. Through all that chaotic travel, the players actually gained 6 kilos. And the kicker? They lost their qualifying match to the USA a mere 3 days before the tournament even started and had to turn right back around and go home.
Now, when we actually get to the pitch, the rosters were full of these fascinating, highly unique characters. We had Switzerland's Leopold Kielholz out there playing in actual glasses. You had Austria's Matthias Sindelar, famously known as the Paperman. Hungary's György Sorosi was somehow remarkably named world-class in 3 entirely different positions. And then there was Attilio Ferraris, the disgraced Italian midfielder. It's a great reminder that early football was deeply unpolished, heavily individualistic, and beautifully chaotic.
Speaking of Ferraris, you have got to hear this. Leave your cigarettes, drinks, and billiards queue immediately, come with me, and you have a chance of playing at the World Cup. The Italian coach, Vittorio Pozzo, literally dragged a drunk gambling Ferraris right out of a Roman tavern with those exact words. It just perfectly captures the bizarre romantic innocence of this specific era in sports.
Section 2. Mussolini's propaganda machine, the shadow of fascism. Now, Mussolini realized pretty quickly that absolutely nothing captured the Italian public quite like football, and he was determined to use it.
At the core of this whole operation was the concept of Romanità. This was a fascist ideal geared entirely toward rekindling the strength, discipline, and imperial dominance of the ancient Roman Empire. Mussolini was obsessed with this idea. He turned simple match days into highly structured political rallies. We're talking massive, imposing fascist architecture, black shirts completely filling the stands, and synchronized salutes greeting the players.
And to absolutely guarantee a win for the state, the regime ruthlessly exploited citizenship laws. They utilized Oriondi. These were South American players of Italian descent who were drafted into the Italian team. They took massive stars like Argentina's Luis Monti, who had actually played against Uruguay in the 1930 final, and quite literally drafted them into the Italian military just to fast-track them into an Azzurri jersey.
So going back to that infamous ultimatum, win or die, historical accounts make it super clear just how much psychological weight was dropped on this Italian squad. They weren't just athletes out there playing a game. They were treated as literal soldiers of the state. This was a military assignment, and the pressure to perform was absolute.
Section 3. Brawls, Bias, and Bribes, a tournament marred by controversy. With these intense stakes established, the matches themselves quickly devolved into high-stakes geopolitical thrillers, which is exactly why historians heavily scrutinize the results even today.
And that naturally leads us to a massive historical question. Was the 1934 World Cup fixed? It's a question that hangs heavily over the knockout rounds, completely fueled by historical reports that Mussolini routinely dined with the very referees officiating Italy's matches the night before they played. Take the quarterfinal against Spain, for example. It was a highly controversial affair. The first match ended in a 1-1 draw, but it was basically a bloodbath. Spanish goalkeeper Ricardo Zamora was injured by these incredibly violent tackles that went completely unpunished. Because there were no penalty shootouts back then, they played a replay the very next day. In that 1-0 victory for Italy, highly questionable calls by the Swiss referee resulted in 2 Spanish goals being completely disallowed.
But if you want to understand just how bizarre the officiating actually got, look no further than the semifinal against Austria's famous Wonder Team. The Swedish referee Ivan Eklund, who had been personally invited up to Mussolini's private box before the game, actively intercepted an Austrian pass with his own head. He literally played defense for Italy during a live World Cup match.
Section 4. Winning at all costs. The ultimate propaganda coup. It all comes down to the climax in the, very appropriately named, Stadium of the National Fascist Party in Rome. The final match, Italy versus Czechoslovakia.
Czechoslovakia actually came incredibly close to spoiling the dictator's grand plans. They managed to hold a 1-0 lead all the way up until the 80th minute. But with the entire weight of the regime on their shoulders, the Italians managed to score the equalizer right before the whistle, force extra time, and ultimately secure a 2-1 victory.
And the trophy presentation? Just a wild visual contrast. You had the official FIFA award, the Jules Rimet Trophy, which was your standard-sized sports cup. But Mussolini had custom-built the Coppa del Duce, this massively oversized trophy that entirely dwarfed the official one. It just perfectly visualizes how the fascist regime quite literally tried to overshadow the sport itself.
The aftermath was exactly what the regime wanted. The Italian players stood there on the podium, forced to give the fascist salute as the stadium completely erupted. The state-controlled press immediately went into overdrive, framing the sporting victory as undeniable proof of fascist superiority, cementing what historians widely consider to be one of the darkest propaganda victories in sports history.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. Did the 1934 World Cup prove the unifying power of sport, or did it just highlight the terrifying effectiveness of state-sponsored propaganda? It is a really heavy question to leave you with, but one that absolutely challenges us to look closely at how the world's biggest stages can be used or misused, even today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helps you better understand the complex, messy history behind the beautiful game.